In our last video, our turtles Annie, Anvi, and Dima took turns drawing some cool shapes. Annie started off by drawing an orange square, then Anvi drew a green hexagon around Annie's square, and Dima wrapped it up by drawing an octagon around everything. Perhaps you noticed that our code got quite long. We used copy-paste to copy-pasta lots of code to draw the sides of our shapes. But suppose you were telling me how to draw a square. You'd probably say, draw a line, turn right, then do it again, and once more, and one last time, and you'll end up back where you started. Another way you could describe it would be, draw a line, turn to the right, then repeat those steps 4 times in total. This is a much simpler way to describe how to draw a square. We can do the same idea in Python using a for loop. For loops help us make our code simpler by avoiding repetition. Today we're going to discover how to use a for loop to make our code simpler. This is the code we wrote last time. Let's run it again to remind ourselves what it did. Nice! There are our turtles drawing our 3 shapes. Now let's have Annie draw a square again, but smarter this time. Notice how we tell Annie to move forwards 4 times and to turn right 3 times? Well, let's modify this code to do it with a for loop instead. To do this, we first select and delete the duplicated code. Then we type here, for count in range parentheses 4 colon. Now, to tell Python that we want these 2 lines to be repeated in the loop, we indent them by placing our cursor here and pressing tab, and here and tab again. In Python, we use a for loop to repeat an action multiple times. Range tells the computer how many times to repeat something, so range parentheses 4 repeats the loop 4 times, which is perfect for drawing a square with 4 sides. Count is a counter that keeps track of how many sides we've drawn so far. So first, count will be 0 when it is drawing the top, 1 when it is drawing the right side, 2 for the bottom, and 3 for the left side. You might think that count should be 1 for the top and 2 for the right side and so on, but for reasons, many programming languages start counting at 0 instead of 1. Now, let's do the same for Anvi. Here is the spot that we'll be making our code change. If you want to try it yourself, pause the video and give it a try. If you're not at a computer, think about what the changes should be. Maybe say it out loud. Don't worry if there are people around. Okay, so Anvi is making a hexagon, so we want to repeat lines 24 and 25 6 times. Let's start by deleting lines 26 through 35. Then we type for count in range parentheses 6, and then we indent these 2 statements, close and rerun. Great. Dima's turn now. Look at all this code. That's 16 lines of code. When we're done for looping it, it should only be 3. If you didn't get it last time, then 3rd time's a charm, right? Think about what we need to do and how many times we need to do it. Pause the video and puzzle it out for yourself. Did you figure it out? Let's find out. So we start by deleting the duplicate code. Then we type for count in range parentheses 8 colon, and then we indent the statements. Rerun. Notice that our code is much smaller and simpler. With a for loop, it's always just 3 lines of code, no matter how many sides our shape has. Remember, smart coders find simple solutions to problems. Okay, let's make some new art. We have a very enterprising turtle named Keith, and Keith wants to make a spiral. To start out, we'll say bye to Annie, Anvi, and Dima, and we'll delete all our previous code. Don't worry, if you want to find it again, I've posted a link to the code down in the doobly-doo. First, let's create Keith the turtle. Type Keith equals turtle.turtle parentheses. And of course, Keith should look like a turtle, so type Keith.shape parentheses quote turtle. Let's set the width of our line. Type Keith.width parentheses 5. And finally, let's give Keith a nice color. Type Keith.color parentheses quote. We can use my color picker to pick a color for Keith. Head over to shad.io/color. I think this will be a good color for our turtle. Switch back to our editor and paste the color. Let's see how our new canvas looks. Nice. Okay, time to make a spiral. So one way that we can get Keith to draw a spiral is to move forwards a bit, turn a bit, and do that over and over again. Let's start by making a for loop that loops 100 times. Type for count in range parentheses 100 colon, then press enter. Then Keith.forward parentheses 50, and finally Keith.right parentheses 60. Let's see how that looks. Cool, so there's Keith tracing a hexagon over and over again. If we want him to make a spiral, we have to do something different. We need Keith to move a little bit further each time he moves forward. How can we do that? Pause the video and ponder for a moment. This is a little bit tricky and different from before because now the code in our loop won't be the same every time. It's changing just a little bit. But Keith has a cool trick up his sleeve. You see, we have count, and that happens to be changing every loop. What if we used count as our distance? Let's try. Replace 50 with count. Let's see what happens this time. Wow! Isn't that interesting? We kind of have a hexagonal spiral going on, but the lines are kind of smushed together. How can we fix this? The reason it's smushed together is that we're only moving one space further each time through the loop. We need to move more than one space. Any ideas? Did you think of multiplying count by some number? If so, you're a genius. Let's try multiplying by 2. So type *2 and let's see what happens. Oh my goodness, this is so pretty. By the way, there's another way that we can do this, and it's built into the range function. Let's say that we want Keith to start out moving forward 4 spaces, and then each time through the loop, we want to increase how far Keith travels also by 4 spaces. And let's say we want to do this until Keith is taking giant steps of 500 spaces. To do that, we pass those 3 things here. So initially, Keith will step forward 4 spaces, comma, until he is stepping 500 spaces, comma, with steps increasing by 4 spaces each time. With this change, this will no longer be the count because this loop is now producing Keith's forward distance. So let's rename count to distance, and let's replace count times 2 with distance as well. Rerun. Wow! Look at that beautiful spiral. Today we learned how to use a for loop to make our code simpler. We also saw how to use a for loop to make a spiral. You know, making a spiral without a for loop would have been quite painful, don't you think? Just imagine how you would have done a spiral without a for loop. What would that code have looked like? Can you think of any other things that we might draw using a for loop? I'm curious to know what you come up with. Post your ideas in the comments. This video is the 3rd in a series that gently introduces people to programming with Python and the Turtle Graphics library. If you liked this video, hit the thumbs up. I'm the Friendly TL and I make edutainment videos about software and open source apps that I also make. If you're interested in this kind of content, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. You know, making a spiral without a for loop would have been quite painful, don't you think? Just imagine how you would have done a spiral without a for loop. Why is this so hard?